So, a sudden start. So, hello everybody. I am Tycho Hofstra of the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam from the Netherlands. So, let's see. Yes, I am a research data management steward at the university library. I've also added my email address if you like to spar some more after this. And I am mostly here to speak on behalf of the Ghost Collective, the Games of Horror for Open Science training. Well, I'll tell you all about it, how we get to eventually a Ghost Collective and why it is a ghost specifically. But for now, I'd like to go over some general points regarding open science at the VU, open science and researchers, and how we ended up with the Ghost Collective. As you can see in the blurb, it says, providing good information over science, how can it become a chore for both researchers and data professionals? Well, actually, there was something behind that. I'm not here to argue that it should be a chore. The opposite, I am arguing that having things such as a game or a nice conversation on open science can give us a lot in the long run. So, first of all, open science at the Vrije Universiteit. We have three pillars on which we base our open science, which is open research. We had very nice illustrations made. As you can see, FAIR principles, very important, making it especially definable and accessible is pretty much unlocked nowadays, but especially the interoperable and reusable is something we can still cover a lot of ground in. We have open education, which is a separate team within our university. I do work a lot with them. We use sources such as edu sources and also have a tech lab in which teachers can come say, hey, I've got a good idea, but I need some help in that. And for example, we do 3D printing on demand, and we also created some VR modules, for example, for the lawyer students, so they can practice their dissertation while a virtual judge is staring at them, which helps a lot because going from the classroom to a courtroom can be quite a shock. And also public engagement. This is the hardest of all. We have a community manager. Engaging with researchers is sometimes quite a challenge. So getting the public to engage as well is even a step further. We do have a citizen science coordinator since 2 weeks. So that is nice. So for the professionals, we show it mostly like this, and we try to find points. To improve on every crossing between those three pillars, and policy, recognition and reward, community engagement, support and training, and infrastructure. And as I said before, I am technically a research data management steward. So my day-to-day job is helping researchers with their data management, provide checking data management plans, going over privacy issues. But it overlaps so much with open science that starting 2024, we've decided to just merge the open science and the research data management movements together. So I'm also taking my first steps in navigating and especially mirroring everything I do towards this graph. So I'm not here to tell you what open science is. I hope we all have some sort of grasp on it. But I'm here to tell you about ways we try to bring open science to our researchers. And one way to do it is with our promotion strategy, Together Towards Open Science. And Together Towards Open Science consists of a very distinct style, I believe. Yes, it's a break from normal food design. We try to make it something that we perhaps can even bring wider within other universities. So because open science is something we do all together and it's not a food specific movement. We have stickers, we have flyers, we have posters. We put them on everything, especially the raccoon one is very popular, as you can imagine. And the main goal of it is to put the values of open science on the forefront. Because if we go back to the other designs, we have collective benefit, equity, collaboration, reproducibility, and transparency. And these are pretty hard concepts to just throw into a conversation with a researcher and say, by the way, did you know your research also needs to have a collective benefit, or equity is something we'd like to see back in the way you manage your research. So this is the way we try to break the ice by just having poster stickers, having nice little tidbits of getting them familiar with the general values of open science. But then we have, that's the theory, then we have open science in practice. And I state here, the data steward, am brimming to tell you all about open science. And under researchers, we have researchers that by chance is also very much interested in open science. We also have researchers that just want to know how to implement open science out of good practice. They are convinced. They don't need to know the exact how and what. They just want to know what they need to do right away. And we also have, you might also recognize this kind of researcher, the researcher that must do open science by both the university and or the funder or their accommodating professor. So the first one, I've given a green bar that is very easy to deal with. Most of the time we have a nice conversation on open science. We both go back and forth in providing perhaps some good practices, some ideas, and it is with the other two that we really had to change our strategies, because in talking about open science with the researcher that just wants straight implementation and the researcher that has to do it by, let's say, a higher power, open science becomes work, and open science becomes extra work on top of all the work the researchers have. And in a perfect world, we would have like 75% researchers that are very much interested in open science by default, and 25 that we have to put in some extra. We have to put in some extra meetings, show some nice things, but in practice, it's mostly a 2080 with more researchers having experienced open science as something they are required to do than something they really want to do themselves. Doesn't mean they don't value the values of open science. Still, it comes in on a moment within the research that it will probably translate into more work. So, what do we do? Well, we'll have a nice get-together. I redirect them to open science tools. Perhaps we go over open science framework. Perhaps we look at some general strategies. I take a good look at our data management plan. And I always say the moment I start to mention metadata, they are gone. Well, at the same time, it's so important for open science to have good metadata, but that is always the killer in the conversation. They're like, oh God, I also have to add metadata. Most of our researchers, of course, add metadata. They don't really think about adding metadata. They already do it in some sort of form by keeping research logs, by writing down protocols, machine settings, just because they know that's part of my research. But calling it specifically metadata and saying that there are other steps they can take is usually where research is zone out, because then it becomes clear open science will become more work. So what we discovered is the researchers that were already invested in open science, they came to us after a nice experience with open science. They had, for example, found open code they could directly implement into their research. Perhaps they had enthusiastic peers, which really with which they could spar on the values, which they could talk like, why is this important? Why are we implementing open science instead of this is another set of rules that should be part of your research? Recognition and reward, always very important. And getting published in a diamond journal, especially if the gold route doesn't work. So I'm from the Netherlands. Unfortunately, we share the same country with Elsevier. So we have a lot of times that some researchers butt heads with big journals vouchers that are not sufficient. Things like that, and finding a nice publication in a diamond journal can come as a godsend in some cases. So they got in contact with open science without having to implement it right away, or it came as a nice treat. So a few of my colleagues too thought in 2020, okay, perhaps we should make open science fun. And what's more fun than Halloween? It is it's not really a holiday in the Netherlands, but we thought it's a nice international thing we can use to present the data horror escape room. And I'm going to get him in the screen, and the data horror escape room consists of a sites.google, very simple, and it is a escape room, online escape room, which is doable in an hour, in which you click through different sites and also have to fill in, well, For Google Sites, it would be passwords, but for us, in the case of the data horror escape room, they are answers. Oh, now I stop sharing. I'll share again. And what do you know? It was a big success. So the year after, we said, let's make another one. And this time we got help from the Erasmus University of Rotterdam and the TU Delft, the Technical University Delft. And it became the Open Science Escape Room. Much more polished. Still a Google site. And we got a nice designer involved who made dedicated images for us. And while the story of the first escape room is a escape room, as in you get locked in the room of your professor who says, you need to manage my data management, otherwise I won't let you escape. This time we have a space traveling adventure in which robots from another planet need their source code made open science. 2021. And then 2022, we had the software horror escape room. The publish or perish, it was for some reason cat themed. I very much enjoyed it because we all got to put our cats into the escape room. And this one is built within a Git environment and works way more smoothly and can also give some nice puzzles that are not just fill in the answer. So the Halloween games became a staple, and by 2023, still need to mention, was made in cooperation with Universiteit Leiden and also the Netherlands eScience Center. By 2023, we had a steady cooperation between the Vrije Universiteit, Leiden University, the eScience Center, University of Amsterdam, and Tilburg. And that is how, when we thought we need a name, because this is bigger than just some data stewards messing around and trying to create something fun for Halloween. And so we became the Ghost Collective, the Games of Horror for Open Science Training. The question you might have is, did you make a escape room for 2023? And the answer for that is no, but we did make a card game. So the escape rooms were a nice first steps into having researchers huddle together. We asked them, would you like to try the escape room? It's on open science. And most of them managed to get out within an hour, had some fun, and also picked up some general concepts along the way, like what would consist of good practices within open science, what would be most of the time. We also put in some blatantly wrong answers just to have them, to give them a little kick out of it. And especially thinking of coming up with the blatantly wrong answers inspired us to create Open Science Against Humanity. Now, I don't see a lot of faces, but could you press the raise hand button if you're familiar with the game Cards Against Humanity? Yes. So it's a pretty niche game. Let's see if I. Oh. So it's a pretty niche game, and it started in the 2010s somewhere. And Cards Against Humanity is a card game. It gets described as a card game for horrible people. It's a card game in which you try to create horrible sentences by combining your white cards with the black card, which is flipped open for the rest to see. And then together we decide which one is the most fitting, which one is the funniest. And most of the time you can also, you even learn something, because not all the white cards are as straightforward. So we made that, but this time based on academics. You can play both online, and we have within the university printed decks, and especially printed decks are pretty popular for teams to start a conference or to start a get-together or to have a nice break. It plays very much into the overworked PhD candidate trope. So as you see, I will go over some more examples in a moment. My research consists of blank, so I won't need to consult the data steward. Then you might be able to say my research consists of the upcoming publication deadline, so I won't need to consult the data steward. Well, it breaks my heart, of course, but pretty funny when you're together with other people. What makes it very useful for us is that all cards referencing general open science practices have a QR code, which they can follow to go to a neutral website for information. So there are things like the Open Science Cookbook. We have pages just plainly going to Wikipedia. We have general publications warning on predatory journals, things like that. So if you're not familiar with what your card says, scan it and you can read up upon it. And first of all, find out that it's a thing. Second of all, yeah, you've learned something, even though you're just messing around with your peers. So I can't whip up the game, unfortunately. Perhaps if there are some people sticking around afterwards, we can play around. But for example, you have a black card that gets shown to everybody, and with writing research softwares, it's easy. I just need blank. And below are the white cards you have in your hand. So now it's the trick to find the best or the most funny combinations. White cards with, for example, the AI generated research paper has a QR code. The predatory journals has a QR code. Flawless replication and the slight problems that might come with that, or with the expectance of flawless replication, has a QR code. So even if you're familiar with it, you might think, I'm interested in what the libraries have to say about this. So for 2024, you already saw it. We have another card game in the works, mostly because we had the templates ready. We also already programmed a bit for it. So now we're making, for Valentine's Day next Wednesday, Open Loves Science. which is based on the game Apples to Apples. And it is a game with which you try to find the perfect match with the open card. So it has the same basis as Cards Against Humanity. You try to match one of your own cards with the open card on the table. Only this one is more a discussion game. So they are not clear-cut funny. There are no clear answers. It is something you really have to elaborate. And of course, each card this time has a fitting quote and a QR code to follow. So an example would be the white card on the table would be research data management, and the red cards, they are black in the promo, but we made them white eventually, are, for example, fair, preprints, retraction watch, pirate care, community. And again, if you don't know what any of these are, we really hope you would follow the link. And it might be, and which will help you also in elaborating why you are the perfect match between research data management and FAIR, for example. You might feel inspired. I scrambled together some general tips. As you could see, the creating of the games, it was more of a thing that just happened because two of our data stewards thought it might be fun to create an escape room, which gained traction, and now we're creating printed card games, which are pretty popular within our universities. The first advice I want to give you is also an advice we, of course, give our researchers. Is always check the licenses. There might be a game that's a perfect match to get turned into a open science variant. We try to keep the games. We try to look at games with an open license, such as Cards Against Humanities, or we figured out they need to be such basic premises that you can't really copyright game rules. So at the same time, things like apples to apples, match a card with another card is not something a company can say, yeah, we thought that up. That's our intellectual property. So before you start creating an entire open science version of Risk, make sure that it's first of all possible. It's also for us a great way to put all the data management we preach, we put all the open science we preach in action while making the games and making the cards. GitHub is a great tool for that. It also gives a lot of the incorporating data stewards a reason to really dive into GitHub. And as I said, build it up slowly. Every year it takes more time than we expect. But then again, every year we also have a lot of fun creating it. And I think that's perhaps it's a bit of a cliche, but that's the most important one. Just having some fun yourself as well while dealing with open science. And the most important slide, I'm going to share this, of course, with you afterwards. All the DOI. We have all the games I've shown you have their own Zenodo page. You will find it's all at least. So I believe the first game is a CC BY share alike. From there, they're just CC BY 4.0. So you can for the card Open Science Against Humanity, you can print them out yourself. You can just put them in the many decks online card play tool. Do with it what you want. And especially the Open Science Escape Room and the software or escape room really stand the test of time, because the thing with data management is, of course, that it's always we're always moving forward. So some questions from 2020 might not be very relevant anymore. Yeah, I guess that's it. If you like, we can click through. So this is the Open Science Against Humanity Synodo. And if you go to the GitHub, you can find everything. As you can see, we even have an animated logo now. It's going very well, I must say. As you can see, we have all sorts of files and a Python script which gets everything together. And you can also update it with perhaps institute or university specific examples, or things that might really find traction under your own researchers. I think that's it for my part.
Okay, thank you, Tycho. It was really interesting seeing how open science and data can do like actually whatever we want them to do, and like how it works within our daily work and our everyday jobs and issues. Question. So I think thanks, Tycho, for your presentation, and we can switch to Joanna, the other speaker. Okay, I see her. Hi, yeah. Welcome back. I hope that you enjoyed the Tycho presentation, even if you figured out some problems. But okay, so now the floor is yours. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Cool. Also, thank you very much for the gamification of open science presentations. It's always enlightening and great to see that there's different approaches to encourage and incentivize researchers to adopt open science principles, which most want to, is a no-brainer because we're talking about research integrity. But the system we currently have and find ourselves in academia with the publication pressure and everything makes it really hard to actually implement. So to have gaming approaches really helps to spark conversations, to have, as you also said, a joyful and fun approach that takes off the burden and the seriousness. And yeah, so there's quite a few institutions across Europe as well as the States that have taken a similar approach, and I feel like your team is focusing on the horror stories or trying to have a horror and scary approach, which might which I think resonates with a lot of people. And just to assure people in the audience, there's also other approaches that are being taken through gamification, and but everything is a great effort and highly appreciated. I will, after my slides, share in the chat the links to the resources, including the presentation. So you don't need to take notes, but I encourage you anyways to take notes of anything that resonates with you that you would like to memorize and remember for yourselves, and for consideration of implementing any ideas that you might have from what I present to you, and also what we discuss afterwards. Because it turns out research, I have to look up those paper papers, but I think we can also speak from experience. What we write down with our hands helps our brain to wire down the information and then eventually to process and implement accordingly. So, okay. Okay, I think we're already sharing, right? So
yes, you are, and I mean, I can see pretty clearly.
Yeah, so this looks a bit scary. Again, we will find the link to this map later on, but this is a visual map of open science resources, close to 1,000 that you can find online and in various capacities. I mentioned earlier in my introduction, so I'm a trainer in science communication. Any of my trainings and all of them are based on open science principles. And I get a lot of the questions, which also we just had after the first presentation. It's all great with open science, but in my discipline, we don't do open science. I don't know how I can do any of that because it's just not common for us. Like in mathematics or in psychology, there's actually a lot going on. And the psychology community, also driven a lot from the Netherlands and the United States. There have been strong incentives and call for openness for various reasons. And the issues why we're having these conversations are the same in all disciplines, all parts of the world. So that's why this map started off as a means to help researchers, also librarians, publishers, to discover open science resources based on a discipline. So for example, if you search for biology in this one, open science principles, I need to, so you can also switch the view by language, by region. So this is how then later involved. I won't go into the details because I want to make another point, but what did I say, by discipline? So focus view by discipline. Now we have biology in the center, the research field. And here, like when I say resources, it can be anything from a guide, a tutorial, an article that says this is open science in whatever subdomain of biology. You find resources from across the research workflow. There are, for biology and biosciences, there are two working groups in the Research Data Alliance, where the focus is on open data and shared data. There is then also subdisciplines, which you can then dive into from biology. So the resolution of the map has become quite complex because of all the subdisciplines and research fields that we are dealing with. But just another example, there is a peer community, and is an organization that also, amongst others, detach the peer review process from the journal. So we are looking with open science, we want to achieve journal and publisher independent peer review, because like to get rid of all kinds of biases and constraints that come when the peer review is tied to a publisher. And peer community in PCI has done that and has specified the review community and efforts and rewards also to various subdisciplines of the biosciences primarily. So this one is for math and computational biologies, and you can, on each of these nodes, you find a short description and also the link to the actual information page of that resource. And just so, because my theme for today's session is multilingualism, and I'm very passionate about that. Before showing you how the map resolves by language, I would like to ask, and if you could share in the chat, which languages do you speak? Like your mother tongue. I think we all speak and write and understand English, so it would be English, your mother tongue, and maybe one or two other languages. So if you could just indicate that in the chat, I'll also do that. And then let's just give this like a few seconds. Oh. And also make sure to list all the languages that you actually comprehend, like understand, and not only your mother tongue, because English is already like another language, and then you're looking at being bilingual at minimum. But I'm sure many of you can also understand and speak some other languages, and elementary proficiency does count here, so you don't have to be fluent necessarily. So for me is German first language, English second, Swedish, a little bit of Spanish, Italian. I'm not sure if that counts. I only know a few phrases and ice cream flavors from my childhood visits. And then Swahili, a few phrases. So yeah, you get the idea. Also, I prepared to share the slides later on, but here you have them. So you can, please bear with me. So I'll guide you through. But I also share them by email with Benedetta, and you will surely get access to all of this. Okay, so now we have an idea, and even if you only speak English, I don't think it's the case in this group in EU projects, but that's also okay. But it helps to raise awareness what an effort it is to communicate highly complex information in a foreign language, and we'll come to talk about that in just a few minutes, but also what an opportunity to notice and to get access to information that is only available in a particular language. And also let me tell you that English, in my view, is not the best language to describe any research in, because it's quite recent. It has I'm also not an ancestral researcher, but the English language is known to not be as diverse as especially other European languages like Italian and probably also Dutch and Spanish and French. And in many other languages, you have way more words by the count alone to describe our environments. And this is what languages do. They help us communicate with each other and also to describe what we see around us and how we engage with living and non-living objects and subjects. All right. So now resolving this by language gives a picture where, of course, most, as you might assume, most resources are available in English, but many of these resources, or various levels, have been translated into other languages, and open science resources have been developed starting with a language other than English. And this is what I'm trying to map here, and this is an ongoing project, and anyone is most welcome to join. And because I say Greek in by Konstantina, let's look what I think it's Hellenica, no, the language. But you can also search for Greek, Hellenica. No, sorry.
Yeah, that's it.
So it's confusing for for us other Europeans that the Greek word for Greek is so different from what we assume it would be. But, so here we have, and I'm sure there's much more, but this is to start with. The Helsinki Initiative is basically a declaration on the importance of language diversity, which I'll guide you through also a little bit. And you're most welcome to explore the website further. And the initiative itself, or the declaration and the call to action, has been translated into all these languages, including Greek. The San Francisco Declaration Research Assessment has been translated into all of these, including Greek. Well, then we have the regions. I also added a page or a note where, the country, but then also for other languages, we'll also see where else is this language actually spoken. Applies a lot to French, where, I mean, it's more known for Spanish to be spoken also in Latin America, but also in 2 or 3 countries in Africa as an official language. And French, did I just say French? No, Spanish, and then French the same. Well, so half of Africa, almost, or 1/3 of Africa is Francophone. But then there's also Polynesian islands, which have French. So colonialism did its thing to the distribution of language, and then also how those languages change in those regions. And that's also natural evolution. And then there's other resources that are relevant and related to open science initiatives and calls to action. EU projects, so this is on citizen science, where researchers like for CATALISI have been involved who bring multilingualism into the project naturally, and then the resources are also incentivized or demanded by the EU to be presented, presenting the results in more than just one language, because yeah. And now finally, let's switch to, I see it's one person is already sneaking in. That is okay, but please just try and follow my presentations. Did I just unshare? Sorry. Okay, sharing again. It's just trying to get into a presentation mode. Okay, so here are my contact details. Again, you also have the link to these slides in the chat. And also, like was just said, like,
I'm sorry to interrupt, Joe. I don't know if it's just my problem, but I do not see your slide anymore.
I get,
okay.
Yeah, it's because I switch back and forth with the slide.
Okay, sorry. But since you were talking about your presentation.
Thank you. So then to be safe.
Now I see.
Yeah, let's stay here then.
Yeah.
Or let's go here and where's the full screen? Yeah, let's take this. It should work. I think it's a Teams issue. My computer is used to Zoom. Sorry about that.
Okay. It's fine.
I'm not a big fan of Microsoft, but that's another story. Okay. So yeah, so my intention as a trainer and researcher as well still. So I have a background in biology, but I'm now doing research on open science and research equity and all of these things. I feel like research should be joy. Any work we do for a living should be enjoyable, because we're eventually, all of us are serving society one way or the other. And as researchers, even if you do basic research, you're contributing to the acquisition of knowledge, and it might lead to applied research. It's very likely to do so, actually. So that's a huge purpose. And to be, as a researcher and also other science research stakeholder, to be aware of the why are we doing this? Why are we here? What's the bigger picture? What pieces am I contributing as an individual to bring peace to which region of the world, or to help the planet to heal in one aspect or the other? So these are all big opportunities to see value in the everyday activities, but also to feel joy in the work that we're doing, because I think that comes on any living organism on this planet has a purpose for being here. And if we are aware of that purpose and find a way to actually live that purpose and find a way to apply our skills and interests to serve that purpose, then we're happy. That's happiness by definition. So I want to provide access, that's why my brand is called Access to Perspectives, to interdisciplinary questions and standpoints, mitigating miscommunication, because terminology is same but different, and all of this. But at the end of the day, I want to be happy, and I hope to bring joy and happiness back into the research practice. We have now, luckily, a globally inclusive and also globally mandated reference with a UNESCO recommendation on open science. I'm in close touch and also contributing to some of the working groups you find on the website. If you haven't, I urge you to explore the page, UNESCO, English Open Science. They also have a toolkit for implementation, which with straightforward, very pragmatic concepts, but also action points that a librarian, a researcher, and a publisher can take to advance open science in one or the other way at whichever part of the world. The consultation to bring about these recommendations has taken up, I think, about 2.5 years. So this is a globally inclusive effort that was made, which led to the adoption by, I think, all by now member states and governments from around the world to, yes, this is what we want. We want research to have a purpose. And then you might also be aware of the Sustainable Development Goals. And the question now is, and you already know the answer, can open science enable global knowledge exchange? Of course, yes. And then what aspect does language speak in that regard? But also any of the other principles and pillars of open science. So the UNESCO recommendation states and has also come up with a globally inclusive definition for open science. And there's not one definition of open science. There's many, and that's okay, because each discipline needs their own approach to open science. And in my understanding, like, I'm actually sad that we need a word for something that should be default. Like, open science just says, the word open science means like open to, well, you can always ask open to whom and when and how. That's now the tricky part for implementation, which is not easy to answer. But what we want as a human society, or as a global human society, what we want is to share that information that researchers acquire to make them applicable for everyone's benefit, including the planet, if the planet was a persona, which you can also argue. Know that indigenous communities call the planet Mother Earth, which is very much personified. But I feel that's a necessary philosophy which helps also to take better care of the planet than Western societies and modern society, whatever it's called modern, we're currently doing. Okay, so open science is a set of principles and practices that aim to make scientific research from all fields accessible to everyone for the benefits of scientists and society as a whole. Open science is about making sure not only that scientific knowledge is accessible, but also that the production of that knowledge itself is inclusive, equitable, and sustainable. How can we do that? And that's the how is again the implementation and the tricky part, and that's why we're having these conversations. There are several principles, and you can also add to this list that are known to be pillars of open science. Open access is most widely discussed. Unfortunately, open access and open science, the terms are sometimes used interchangeably, which they shouldn't be, because open science is much more than just open access. And open access should also not only go in one direction, but that's for another time to discuss. Open data is most often misconceived. Open here does not mean 100% transparent and disclosed to everyone on the internet. It does make sense. There can also be a lot of harm that comes with that. What open means and wants is fair, meaning findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable by anyone who wants to access that information, but also has the expertise to make an informed reuse of the information. And that can be anyone who has access to the internet, but it's the researcher's responsibility to assess if the research generated and the conclusions drawn from it and the data presented are safe to share with the global society and anyone who may or may not want to misuse that information. And there's always that threat, as we've seen in history happen quite a few times, fortunately. So it's not about 100% open, but it's more about collaboration, integrity, transparency, where transparency, again, does not mean you have to be able to look through each step of the process, but to understand that there's a logic behind and standards being followed. And we have open hardware, citizen science, citizen engagement, open methods, peer review, software, hardware, and open educational resources, as were just presented. So now, what I think is, or what I've most often find missing from these conversations, but like the UNESCO recommendations have included multilingualism explicitly, and also there's been more and more talk about, because the Helsinki Initiative working group is quite how to say, verbal and quite well represented in various fora to advocate for multilingualism. So you can see it as standing on its own or as part of open access, but it's also cross-cutting in all other principles, what I feel, because the practice of research must, and is also in real life, is done in a local language, and then the translation into English often happens at the time of publication, and that's where the barriers come. And of course, there's also other barriers and instances where you have to speak English. And yeah, but let's just go through what the Helsinki Initiative claims and recommends. So research is international, we know that, and that's how we like it. Multilingualism keeps locally relevant research alive. What happens now is that researchers are being forced to translate their research into English, submitting to, I'm only using this word once in a presentation, hopefully, high impact factor journals, which is such a misleading concept, and it's corrupted everything we do in research, and it's really hurting my heart. So I've decided to just ignore it, and whenever I talk about impact, I mean exclusively impact to society. Has nothing to do with any rankings of journals or institutions or whatsoever. And those journals, they say, oh, we only accept your work if it's of international relevance. And unfortunately, when they say international relevance, they mostly refer to what is known in Western countries, meaning Central and Western Europe and North America. The rest of the world doesn't seem to interest those journals, even though they're also now becoming more aware that that's an issue. But we not have enough evidence in English available of how whichever research topic translates into regional relevant concepts, because it has been excluded from the English conversation until today, for the most part, not 100%, but I would guess more than 90%, if we have to add numbers. So now the other claim is disseminating research results in your own language creates impact. And here again, we're talking about societal impact. Why are you doing your research? What is your research field, and why are you doing your research? To then publish in Nature to make it seem as if this applies anywhere in the world, which surely it doesn't, just for you to, well, and then that's the incentive and the only chance for you to advance your career. How screwed up is that? Like, it doesn't make sense. And that's why researchers feel miserable, consciously, unconsciously so, because it has such a yeah, the effect and the frustration is just there by default with the current setting. It is vital to interact with society and share knowledge beyond academia. Citizen engagement is a must do, otherwise there's no point in why are we doing research in the first place if we don't engage with societies on a local, national, regional, and also global level where it applies or where it's feasible, but not necessarily with each and every research article. An infrastructure of scholarly communication in national languages is fragile. We are building digital infrastructure for science communication currently exclusively in English. There's hardly any interface, it's just a few, and it's also tedious to add multilingualism to user interfaces for submission portals of institutional repositories or journal systems. They don't, also even the big journals, they do not prioritize that. They expect everyone to be good enough in English to submit their work. And again, like, English is predominant. I use English myself, is not to blame the language, and also I appreciate that we have currently English as one of the lingua francas, where Mandarin Chinese is another one, where Spanish is another one, where Arabic is another one. English is not the only lingua franca that we have in research, and but it's enforced by too few what do you call them, stakeholders, which are commercial publishers, which are harming academia at scale. And I'm not only talking about even the so-called non-profits publishers, the big ones, they have the same APC approach. They place the same incentives. They have the same exclusion criteria and biases inbuilt into their system, because we do not have, or we actually do have viable alternatives, but they are not backed financially enough. So we need to advocate for things like diamond open access, where it's unclear what does it even mean, but it basically comes down to the author and the public should not pay. Anybody else can pay. And that's, again, scholarly publishing, but generally speaking. But yeah, so there's a whole lot of work to still do, but there's also a whole lot of discussion ongoing, and there's a lot of opportunities for action and for changing paradigms and changing practices today. I was invited to review this article, which has in the meantime been published, The Manifold Causes of Being a Non-Native English Speaker. You also find that in the chat, and we'll get the email with a reference. And here's what I said, like where you have barriers, or where all of us have barriers, when we see English as being dominant in most research disciplines nowadays. And the paper highlights a few issues that you see depicted here. And one is that many early career researchers refrain from applying to attend a conference that's in English, where they would have to present a poster or even a talk in English, because they feel their English is not good enough. And that's a missed opportunity of exposing yourself and networking. And you can actually measure the negative impacts downscale of career choices changing because of fears that your language skills are not good enough. And how sad is that? And then there's hardly any alternatives and opportunities in your own language. Or okay, we can ask another question to the chat, or maybe take this to discussion. How many conferences have you attended last year that where the conference language was your native tongue? And I leave that there. You can answer in the chat, and we can also discuss later. I mentioned earlier that I also co-created an Africa-focused open access publishing portal called Africa Archive, which is currently being institutionalized with the UbuntuNet Alliance, which is a regional research and education network for Eastern and Southern Africa, with a continental mandate. And you see here Professor Medora Gart, who is the director of that organization, UbuntuNet Alliance, or network rather. And our mission is to make African research discoverable together. And in presentations in Africa, we use that sentence in African languages, but in Italian, because I have engaged with Benedetta and others, we can also say the same in Italian. Rendiamo scoperta la ricerca africana insieme. I hope that was okay, but you can pronounce it for yourselves. You get the idea.
It was.
Thank you. I had Google help me, or some other system. So there's also digital tools that we can use to be more inclusive and more approaching and more respectful and acknowledging multilingualism, by making the effort to just learn a greeting and to come to a conference in Rome and greet the audience in Italian. It really doesn't make a big effort, but it builds a lot of trust to then have a meaningful conversation. So what we're doing with Africa Archive is not only, or besides providing a platform where researchers can share their work for free, get a DOI, make their work discoverable in their own languages, meaning also African languages, which hasn't been deployed just yet because, unfortunately, colonialism did its thing. So many researchers and still also professionals feel that African languages do not have a culture of being used in a professional setting. And we want to change that for research. So we've come up with 10 principles for open access and scholarly communication, one of which is that specific for an African context. So one of which is African research output should be made available in the principal common language of the global science community, which is not necessarily English. I'm just saying that again. So for Francophone Africa, there would be very much French. In Portuguese, Lusophone countries, Mozambique, Madagascar, Angola would be Portuguese. And then there's also a few regions that speak Spanish. And there's colonial heritage. And then you have the of course, Afrikaans. And then you have the local languages, the traditional African languages. So that's why, that's why we highlight that explicitly, or we had to explicitly highlight that separately. It's funny, in Latin America, we think it's a huge effort if we make the information available or find a way to translate between English, Spanish, and Portuguese, which also are colonial languages, if you think about it. But the majority of the citizenship is, maybe not by number, but by economic impact, is Spanish and Portuguese speaking only. So it's a sensitive topic. We could talk for days and months about this, but it's important to have such considerations. So one of the projects that we have engaged in with these organizations that you see here is to take research articles that have been first authored by a Black African researcher across disciplines. Then the organization Science Link is science communication specialized in. They have then translated that into a lay summary, like a simple language, avoiding all the scientific specific terms. A summary, like an abstract, and that has then been coordinated by ST Communications, which is a translation firm specialized in actual African languages, has mobilize their community to translate these summaries into the 6 languages: Zulu, Northern Sotho, Yoruba, Hausa, Luganda, Amharic. The idea here is to build a corpus of digital information to feed a language translation algorithm for machine translation, like you have seen for Google Translate. And I can show you just quickly the page. You can already explore some of these. So here are the works that we have uploaded so far. You should be able, it's quite an effort. Not only the translation work was done by the other organizations, but now we are in the process of, they're all there, but now the hard work is to tie them all together. So the idea would be, so it seems to be So ideally we would have here an overview. No, it's not ready yet. So we have a team working on this, but I'm sorry that I just can't find an example where I can see what it then looks like. Okay, here we go. So this one, here's the actual article. So you can look this up. Ideally this would be clickable, but you can also copy paste the link to the actual article. And then here's the lay summary. And then this links then back to the original article. And here you also have access to the translations so this is English, and here is the translation of that lay summary in Amharic. This is spoken in, what's the country now? North of Kenya. Ethiopia. Thank you, sorry. Then we have Yoruba as Nigeria, Zulu, South Africa, and also, like, look at just how beautiful this looks. I have no idea what it says, but I know what it says by going back to the English translation. But then people in those regions, for the first time ever, they see a scientific output presented to them in their mother tongue. How cool is that? All right. Just quickly see. No, I think that was the last slide. Again, here are the links of the resources that I've shared with you, and I just want to quickly leave you with a glimpse of hope, because I'm building a community program called Impact, where, again, also impact refers only and exclusively to societal and environmental positive impact. I'm covering all the steps in the academic workflow, touching, including multilingualism, ethics, principles, and values, and research equity. So my approach as a trainer and consultant and speaker is to make all of these livable in an actual research real life scenario, and to discuss with the community and help also with my colleagues. So it's not only me, but nobody is doing anything in isolation unless there's only a few things that you can do alone. No, sorry, wrong page. But we have a team of co-creatives, some of which have deceased, like my dog, which was my personal mental health well-being coach. But the people in color are still very much alive and kicking and ready to also support you and be of support if you have any questions. They're approachable. You find their LinkedIn details and website. If you have any questions and anything that they've specialized in, you're most welcome to contact them directly or through me, through the email that I shared in the chat. And that's it. I hope we still have time for discussion, because I tend to lose myself sometimes because all these topics are very passionate, or I'm very passionate about.
Do not see any other raised hand. So I think, okay, so we have another extra participants. Since we were talking about multilingualism, I think that his or her opinion was worth it. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining our webinar. Many point of view, many point of discussion, many really interesting presentation. I'll now send you in the chat the link to give us a feedback. Let me know if you find out any problem. And as I said, the recording of the session will be posted on our channels as soon as possible. As I said before, I'm sure that Joanna and Tycho are more than pleased to stay in contact with us and to share many other information about open science as an icebreaking and has connected to the multilingualism. So thank you, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks
all.
a lot.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.